Hi, this is Lisa McManus from ATK Gearheads, and I'm here to answer some of the really terrific questions that you put in the comments under our video on space-saving gadgets. Let's get started. Someone asked, what about an immersion blender with attachments instead of a hand mixer? We showed our winning hand mixer and said this is, smaller and more compact than a stand mixer because, if you're not a big baker, you're just making like a birthday cake once a year or something, you don't necessarily need a full-size stand mixer. You can really get a much more compact and inexpensive choice with a hand mixer. An immersion blender with attachments. Our winning immersion blender by Braun has a whisk attachment, and that can definitely be used for whipping cream or something instead of a hand mixer. On the other hand, if you're trying to really like cream butter and sugar, or do something that's a little more difficult, you may have a little more trouble with a hand mixer. It's going to be a lot more work. I'm not saying it couldn't work, but I think it's going to take a lot more effort. I personally haven't tested this, so I'm speculating a little bit, but I'd say I would prefer to have one of each, and they're not expensive, so I would get a hand mixer and an immersion blender rather than trying to make the immersion blender stand in for a hand mixer all the time. Depending on the task. If it's a lighter task, sure, it can do it. Someone was asking for nesting liquid measuring cups that don't have handles so they stack neatly. We haven't really loved any measuring cups that don't have handles because sometimes you're measuring hot liquids and it's, uncomfortable to hold ones that don't have any handles. That said, we have two brands of liquid measuring cups that we really like. One is OXO and the other is Pyrex. The Pyrex ones are a little more problematic for stacking, but the OXO ones do stack. So maybe that's what you want to go for. Those have nice grippy silicone handles and they have that angled piece inside that lets you measure liquids without bending down to check that the meniscus, the liquid's right on the level of the measuring cup. So it's a standing measuring cup. You can stand up and measure, and those stack. So maybe you should go for that. And they have a nice handle that doesn't get hot. I'd like to know where and how you store all these appliances and tools. Every kitchen's different, and how you cook and what you use all the time really will make a difference in how you store things. Some people love to have open shelves and put things right there. Other people really want to put things away. I'd say look at what you're using on a regular basis and make sure it's right at hand, and that will make your cooking easier every day. For things that you're not using often, say you only bake once or twice a year, don't have a stand mixer or a hand mixer in the front of your cabinet or on your counter. Put them away. Put the heavy things that you use often right in front, right on top. I used to keep my big 12-inch cast iron skillet right on my stovetop. I now have a shelf the same height as my stovetop, and it's right next to it. So that's what made it easy for me to grab and use that. And just think about what do you use every day and organize your kitchen kind of in concentric circles away from where you need to stand. What can you grab easily and quickly that you're using constantly, and then put everything there and then work backwards from that. Specific things that we store. I have a pan drawer, so I stack my skillets, a lot of them in this drawer, and I nest them. We put either paper towels or paper plates between nonstick skillets so they don't scrape against each other. I have a vertical cabinet for cutting boards. I have a slightly bigger kitchen than I think some people do in cities. I've had really super tiny kitchens, and you have to be creative, hang things, hooks every place. You can put inside of your cupboard doors, you can have racks and things to stick spices or whatever. So you just have to get creative about the space you have. But again, it's kind of more about what do you need to be able to grab quickly every day. Someone asked, can you suggest what are the most essential items for a toaster oven? Well, I would say for a toaster oven, a lot of them come with really flimsy pans that are really just very cheap. They put all the money into the oven and they throw these little flimsy pans in so it looks like you got more. So we really like to use an eighth sheet pan. Our standard baking sheet is a half sheet pan. So it's a half size sheet pan. The quarter size, if you have a really big toaster oven, might work, but the eighth size is a really great size. And they even come, you can get a little cooling rack to go inside, which is great if you want to use it for broiling something. It holds the food up. Um, we have a 6 cup muffin tin that we tested that we love. We have small bundt pan. So like this couple of different pieces of equipment that can be really useful if you want to bake or roast or cook in your toaster oven. Someone asked, I have a cooktop. How do I use my 2-quart saucepan when the fire ring is larger than the diameter of the pan? Wow, okay. Yeah, most gas stoves have at least one smaller burner that will fit a smaller pan, but it sounds like yours doesn't. You might be out of luck. You really don't want the fire going up the outside of the pan. Turn it way down. I, I could suggest that, but use your smallest burner, turn the heat way down, and be careful because you don't need the heat blasting up the sides. You really want to keep it under the bottom. And maybe 2 quarts is too small for your stove. Um, Someone was asking, does the Nordic Ware sheet pan that we love warp when it's coming to temperature in the oven? No, actually, it's a pretty good one. It's very sturdy. It's not that it can't warp. Every sheet of metal can warp under the right conditions, and the conditions are thermal shock, which means you're going from very cold to very hot, or vice versa. Um, if you have cold area and a not cold area, so if you have like a frozen piece of food on one piece of the pan, the other part is warm, you're going to have some difference of temperature, and that will cause the metal to warp. So what you want to do is spread food evenly over the pan if you're concerned about warping. Um, you can preheat it a little bit with the oven, or just make sure that your stuff isn't going from like super cold just super hot. It may warp a little bit, but it will come back for the most part. We haven't seen a ton of warping with this pan, and we really use them hard. We put them, on the grill. We put them in the under the broiler. We put them in the oven, and they're real workhorses. So it's one of the better sheet pans for being a nice thickness. It also has a wire around the rim in that rolled rim, and that helps keep it shape a little bit better. But then you don't want to shock it. You don't want to put some frozen food in one part of the pan. Spread it out. What do you all use to clean your Nordic Ware sheet pans? Well, I have two things to say to that. Just soap and water works pretty well. And we also use Barkeeper's Friend if we really want to scrub it. Barkeeper's Friend is great to scrub it back down to that silver color that it was when it was new. But as I think we've mentioned before, you don't have to get them silver again. That little bit of browning that those pans get actually make it brown better. It makes it cook better. A dark finished pan as opposed to a light finished pan, so a light silver pan versus a dark gray or brown pan is going to actually radiate heat differently. The dark pans actually hold heat and heat the food faster and hotter, whereas a light pan doesn't. It tends to just reflect the heat, and it doesn't heat up as much. So, for instance, in a cake pan, we love a light colored pan because it doesn't set the cake and then you get that dome where the edges are set and then the interior keeps rising. You get a nice tall cake that's evenly risen because it's a light colored pan. A dark colored cake pan we actually chose to make our pan pizza. We have a Chicago pan pizza that we make in a round cake pan, and for that we wanted a dark charcoal gray color one because it made the crust nice and brown, whereas that light colored cake pan didn't do as good a job in that regard. So like you don't always need to scrub your sheet pan back to being brand new silver. That slight browning that it gets from use is actually going to help brown your vegetables when you roast them or any of the things that you want to do. So don't worry about getting it perfectly clean every time. We had a lot of comments about our 2-quart saucepan winner from All Clad being really expensive. And it is, I'll admit. That cookware is not cheap. On the other hand, you only have to buy it once in a lifetime and you'll hand it down. They are really tough pans. But we have a Best Buy. It's by Traumatina. It's Traumatina's Gourmet Tri-Ply line. It was about $50 when we tested it. So It's still not cheap, but it's a good pan. It's got the three layers of metal, the stainless steel, aluminum, stainless steel throughout the pan. They really give it a good ability to brown and hold heat and cook evenly. And it's really comparable to the all clad, which is much more expensive. You get what you pay for, so it's worth paying a little more upfront for cookware that's going to last. That's our basic advice. So I hope those were helpful answers. We love your questions and keep them coming. I hope we'll see you next time on Gearheads.